Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. The stated goal of climate alarmists is to shut down fossil fuels, drive energy prices up, and force a transition to wind and solar.
And climate change is a great example. When I was asked earlier about the issue of coal, under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. Whatever technologies are out there that are being presented, whatever power plants that are being built, that they would have to meet the rigors of that market and the ratcheted down caps that are imposed every year. So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted.
But kiddo, I want you to just take a look, okay? You don't have to agree, but I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate. Okay?
They've been quite successful at reducing the supply of energy and driving energy prices up. And now that they've succeeded in creating huge problems, they're trying to blame the very people who are warning about the dangers of green energy policy. Here's a very scientific article from the Financial Times. Don't underestimate the power of climate BS. The claim that net zero policies are to blame for the energy crisis is starting to gain traction. Then they blame Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, and Christopher Monckton for the energy mess which they created themselves. The article starts out with some statistics in an effort to deflect blame from the mess they created. Floods in Pakistan killed more than 1,700 people this year. China had its longest heat wave since national records began. China actually has records going back thousands of years, and it's long been known that the heat waves and droughts of 1878 and 1896 killed tens of millions of people in China and India as well. In 1931, it was reported that China has had 1,800 major famines since the year 108 BC, which is pretty close to one famine per year, according to the nation's own official records. And as far as flooding in Pakistan goes, they had much worse floods 50 years ago, which were blamed on global cooling and the onset of a new ice age. The Great Bola Cyclone of 1970 killed 500,000 people in East Pakistan. The Financial Times is using misleading statistics and harsh language as part of an attempt to cover up the energy mess which they helped create. Meanwhile, the world's #1 climate fraudster Michael Mann is trying to make excuses for the cold weather we've been experiencing. He tweeted, "How could cold extremes possibly be increasing as the planet gets warmer?" And he wrote some broken code in order to try to convince people that increasing levels of carbon dioxide causes accelerating levels of warm and cold extremes. This code would never compile because he forgot to put a semicolon at the end of the third line. But ignoring his bad coding, his claim that cold extremes are getting worse is complete nonsense. According to the National Climate Assessment, the number of record lows has been declining in the United States since the late 1970s. During 1978, more than 8% of nights in the United States measured below 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And since then, there's been a sharp decline in the frequency of very cold nights in the United States. There's also been a sharp decline over the last 90 years in the number of very hot days. And not surprisingly, the average daily temperature range, which is the difference between the daytime high and the nighttime low, has sharply declined as well since 1960. In other words, Michael Mann is misinforming the public once again. He claims that both high and low temperature extremes are increasing, when in fact the exact opposite is the case. Here is some more spectacular denial from climate alarmists. They claim that eating at McDonald's causes bad weather. This sort of nonsense is easier for them to discuss than the actual health effects caused by eating fast food. Climate alarmists frequently argue that I don't have formal training in climate science. So let's take a look at what's going on in academia at Harvard College. 70 years ago, the average grade point average was about 2.5, but now it's up to 3.8. If this trend keeps up, in a few more years, everyone at Harvard will be in the top 1% of their class. It shouldn't surprise anyone that academia is cranking out all sorts of fake climate statistics. Their entire system is based around nonsensical and fake statistics. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on broken academia for the past 15 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki, Upala, and the 4 new puppies on the web at realclimatescience.com.